What are we talking about?
How do you do, neighbor? It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around, and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
Where'd Chris go? Anyway, good morning and welcome back to Berean Spirits, another episode of our weekly Bible study. I am Josh Thornhill with the Westside Church of Christ, and Chris is missing. He's disappeared on us somehow for some reason. So I guess we're going to just jump in here and go at it with just the two of us. I guess we'll see how that goes.
That was weird.
That is weird. Yeah.
I mean, that was during the intro. He disappears.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure he'll be back here in a minute. I guess he just didn't want to do the show, I guess. So anyway, to my, I guess that's on the screen. It's to my right.
No.
Anyway, to my right or on the other side of the screen is Richard Dotson with the Kearney Church of Christ in Kearney, Missouri. How you doing, Richard?
I'm good, but I think I'm to your left. At least you're on my right, on my side.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know. Well, from the way I'm looking, you're right to me. So anyway.
Josh is being caught off guard here, so we both weren't prepared to host the show, and Chris disappeared in their introduction. I don't know during the intro to the show. I don't know where he went, but. Yeah, Josh just popped on in, and so
there he is.
There's Chris.
Howdy.
You just didn't want to do the intro.
I did. I don't know what happened. That was odd.
That was odd.
How's everybody doing?
Well, it's called technology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and blindness. That doesn't help any at all when it comes to technology. But anyway, my name is Chris Peltz. I'm the evangelist with the Southside Church of Christ. You all already introduced yourselves?
We did.
There you go.
Unless they want to hear us introduce ourselves again.
Oh, I doubt it. Man, oh man. Man, I tell you what though, the topic of the day, I'm just going to jump right into it since I don't know anything that y'all said that would be a good lead in.
We were talking about you not being up on the show.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, surprise. I'm here.
It was a surprise. I mean, I was doing something else, and all of a sudden, Josh started talking like, "Where's Chris?" So yeah, it was different.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what happened. That was odd. But anyway, all right. Well, let's. I changed my mind. That's what happened. There we go. There's a good lead in, right? No, we're going to talk about changing minds though today. And this is an interesting topic because I think it is one that sometimes we can become distracted with other goals, even subconsciously. And I kind of explain what I mean by that, because there's an old saying, we should be striving to win souls, not arguments. And sometimes we get lost in trying to win an argument, to prove a point, rather than our focus simply being on winning the soul of the individual that we are talking to. And I think the Ephesians are a great example of this in Revelation chapter 2, verses 1-7, because while they were refuting, it would seem, and hated the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which the Lord also hated, the problem was they had left their first love. And I think the idea of that is not only the love of God and love of their neighbor, but they were proving the Nicolaitans wrong. But what was the point? What was the point of it? And I think sometimes that's where we get caught up in trying to disprove arguments and use certain language to prejudice people against certain teachings, rather than simply proclaiming the truth, answering questions, answering arguments with love, with meekness, but with boldness as well, and really being focused on the goal of letting truth prevail and striving to win souls. So, how do you go about changing minds? And perhaps the first question with that would be, how do you not go about trying to change someone's mind? Josh, sometimes when you get into Bible studies and people are bringing up questions or making arguments, it's easy to lose focus. And so sometimes there are things that we need to really concentrate and determine within ourselves, that there are certain things that we don't want to do, that we don't want to say, for the purpose of moving forward in this Bible study.
Yeah, and I think there's that old idea of, being so worried about winning the battle, you lose the war. I know you and I were, when I first moved to Tennessee, we were visiting with someone, and he was talking about having a Bible study with somebody, and he just absolutely took him to town. And he came in, like, oh, I showed him, and then it's like, oh well, are you gonna study again? No, he ain't gonna study anymore. Well, what did you accomplish then? So I mean, there's a sense in which we can be so focused on winning that particular battle that we lose the war. Ultimately, as you said there, you lose the soul, which is not what we're seeking to do. And then I had a thought as you were talking there, and now it's gone. I can't remember what it was. But the idea though is that the gospel is offensive enough. People want to say that we should never ever be offensive, but the reality is the gospel is going to be offensive. The gospel is offensive to people who don't want to hear what the gospel has to say or what the gospel requires of us. And so you're going to offend people by simply preaching the gospel. Acts chapter 2, Peter preached that Jesus is the Lord, the Messiah, the Christ. And God has exalted him as both Lord and Christ. And he says, and they were cut to the heart. And some of them responded in obedience, and then some did not, of course. But we find that same case in Acts chapter 7 when Stephen preaches, and he calls them stiff-necked and uncircumcised in hearts and ears, and they were cut to the heart there too. But they responded in a negative way and stoned Stephen. So I mean, there's a sense in which the gospel itself is going to be offensive, but we can kind of take that and make it even more offensive by the way that we present it and the way that we try and talk to people about it. And so that's kind of really what we're trying to think about today, is how we can avoid adding unnecessary offense to the gospel and just let it be do the work that it's intended to do. And I've got some thoughts about that as well. But I think the idea is we're trying to not be overly offensive for the sake of being offensive.
Right. Yeah. And Richard, sometimes there are arguments that people make that really distract from the goal of winning souls and proclaiming the gospel. And there are ways or words, phrases sometimes people will use that do more harm than good, right?
Yeah. Excuse me. I was eating walnuts before the show, and I guess some residue got stuck in my voice cords or something. But anyway, sometimes people try to drum up support from others who may be listening, and they may refer to your argument in some type of name, and it's not designed, the comment that they're making is not really designed to change your mind. It's just basically trying to drum up support against you by others. And it could be, trying to influence you into giving up some type of position by trying to associate you with something that they know that you're not, in agreement with. It's not dealing with the issue itself. And, some people call it name calling, labeling, various things of that nature. And sometimes, I think in some cases that can be right. I mean, there are times when people need to be identified as false teachers, for instance. But that's not usually where it starts. I mean, that's usually when somebody has made it very clear that they're going to accept a false position, and they're going to not regard the truth. They've, already have denied any attempts by others to try to teach them the truth. At that point, that's a different story. But we're talking about when someone comes up to someone and we find out there's disagreement, and we think that they're wrong. How do we change their mind? And name calling or labeling is really that's not a good thing to go to. The Apostle Paul, for instance, all through the book of Acts, and I actually did a study on this. It's actually in quite a few places. The most common one you probably know of is in Acts 17, when Paul, as his custom was, went into them and for 3 Sabbaths reasoned with them from the scriptures. And I think that needs to be the key right there, because that's what Paul did all throughout the book of Acts and other places. He would reason with people throughout the scriptures. And so he was making an attempt to show them that the gospel is reasonable, to try to show them that this is the true meaning. This is reasonable. And that's what I think what we need to be doing with other people is talking to them with respect and showing them the gospel and reasoning with them and trying to get them to at least accept the truth. But that's all part of planting, the seed. And we have to be very careful how we plant the seed, because we don't want to hinder its growth. We don't want to be a reason why somebody would not want to accept it. There's been a lot of times when people may not like the person who teaches them the gospel, and they start fighting the whole idea about the message just because they don't want to admit the person that taught them was correct. And that's what we don't want. So we got to be very careful about that.
Sometimes there are words or terms that are used. You talked about labeling earlier, and I want to give a couple of examples very quickly, and I want to talk about a couple of differences as well. For example, the difference between Calvinism or Calvinists and Campbellites, right? Because oftentimes you'll hear the term Campbellite, and it's a derogatory word. It's used to prejudice people against listening to something that usually members of the Lord's church would be teaching, and they'll call them Campbellites in an effort not only just to prejudice, but to try and make the argument that what they're teaching started with Alexander Campbell, for example. And so they'll use that term and they'll use that label, and it's used to, again, prejudice rather than to try to win over. It's used to try and get people not to listen to the arguments that are being made. And you think, well, aren't you doing the same thing by using the term or idea of Calvinist? And here's why I would say not necessarily, because usually and generally speaking, those that I've talked to embrace the idea of Calvinism and even that term. You have Presbyterians, which John Calvin was one of the founders, a co-founder of the Presbyterian Church. You have Reformed Baptists and others who embrace the idea and the term Calvinism and are proud to say that they are Calvinists. And so it's not being used in a way to prejudice someone against them. It's just simply pointing out this is what they teach, this is what they embrace proudly. And so it's not being used in a way, in a derogatory way, but rather in an informative way. Whereas a term like Campbellite or something like that would be used in a way that we would wholeheartedly reject and say, no, nothing we teach whatever began with or was from the mind of Alexander Campbell. That's just simply not true. And so we reject that, but people want to use that to prejudice others against listening to us. Now, if someone came along and said, "No, I don't. I'm not a Calvinist," or they reject that term, I think it would do us well not to keep bringing that up, especially if we're truly desiring to win them over to the truth. If they reject an idea that they should be rejecting, then move on. Don't keep forcing something that's only going to cause them to shut down and not listen to the other things that you have to say. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a number of ways in which we have been misrepresented. We hate orphans. We don't believe in music. All sorts of stuff. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to be careful that we're not accusing people. Like, just because somebody's Baptist and we want to say, "Oh, you believe in once saved, always saved." Well, maybe they don't, because there's some that don't. And so, I don't like being misrepresented. Do you guys?
No, yeah.
And to those watching, do you like being misrepresented? Do you like when people assign positions to you that you don't agree with or you don't believe? I certainly would think not. And so we shouldn't do that to other people. I think very simply, kind of what Chris is saying, rather than just saying, "Hey, you believe this. Do you believe this?" And that's a simple way to come to an understanding of where they are and where you can then go and teach. I will say, though, one of the things as far as changing people's minds, I think is important to remember is that there's going to be times where we're not going to be able to change minds. Jesus couldn't change the minds of the Pharisees. He preached and he taught and he worked with them and he tried to encourage them and he rebuked them and he tried to lead them to the eternal life that he was making available through his death, and they rejected him. And then Paul in Romans chapter 9 and chapter 10, his desire for Israel is that they would be saved. But why aren't they? Because they've rejected the Messiah. And I think you have that principle in Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, 9 and 10, where God says, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." He says in verses 10 and 11, "As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there without watering the earth and making it bear and sprout, and giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so will my word be which goes forth from my mouth." I lost my spot here. It will not return to me empty without accomplishing what pleases me and without succeeding in the matter for which I sent it. I think we've talked about this on this show before, but what he's saying there is when the word of God is preached, every single time it will accomplish, always it will accomplish what God desires for it to accomplish. And I know that that sounds weird because I can preach the gospel to somebody and they're just going to reject it. Well, the gospel accomplished what it was intended to accomplish. And what Isaiah is trying to show there is that the gospel is an invitation that is intended to draw some while repelling others at the same time. That's part of the point there in Romans 9 and verse 18 when he talks about he has mercy on those that he desires and hardens whom he desires. It's not that God is just indiscriminately hardening the hearts of people so that they cannot receive the truth. But the reality is the word of God is going to accomplish one of two things. It's either going to draw you in or it's going to harden you. And so there's going to be some people that we're talking to that we're not going to change their minds. And we need to have the wisdom to determine who do I need to spend this time with and really try and implement some of the things that we're talking about here to win them over versus who do I need to shake the dust off my feet because they're just not going to hear. No matter how well we can speak and present the truth sometimes it's not going to change the minds of people. And I think that is a realization that can help us from getting discouraged sometimes when we're trying to change minds.
Yeah. And, sometimes in this effort that we're engaged in proclaiming the gospel, we get into this mindset that if we're going to change minds, we have to be the one talking. And sometimes the best way to change minds is to let people talk and listen and have patience and hear what it is they have to say and be sincere about it, right? Let them know and understand that you are listening to what they say and ask questions to cause them to talk more and draw out from them how they got to certain conclusions, what passages they were looking at, where did they find these things? Let them talk. And in some instances, in my experience, people have talked themselves out of the things that they believe when they hear themselves actually going through the process of how they got to that conclusion or where who they heard it from or where they heard it. And so sometimes it's not just a matter of, oh, we've got to be the ones speaking. Sometimes we have more control of a situation when we're just listening and hearing out and gaining the information from them that we are studying with and trying to change their minds. How can you change their mind if you don't know what is in their mind? I guess would be one way of asking that question. And so let them tell you, listen to what they're saying so that you know what needs to be changed and then formulate, the best way to go about it from the scriptures in order to make that change happen.
Chris Kramer made a comment, and I think it goes with what Chris Peltz just said. And I'm going to put it up here. He goes, it's hard to change a mind that doesn't think it needs to change. Jesus said that he came to heal the sick. The Pharisees did not believe they were sick. Well, and that's true. All right. The Christian is described as a sower. We go out sowing the seed. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do. 1 Corinthians 3:6, I planted, Apollos watered, Paul said, but God gives the increase. Now, when we think about that, that metaphor, I guess you'd say, as a Christian teaching the gospel is like a farmer sowing seed. When we think about that, I can't help but think about my father-in-law, Chris's father-in-law, our wives or sisters, but he loves gardening, big time gardener. I mean, he takes it very, very serious. And he has a place that he has that is really not conducive for gardens. It's not a good soil. And so out in front of his garden is this huge pile. It's taller than me and Chris both. And it's just filled with rocks. And so, in order for him to sow the seed in this garden, he had to remove stones, he had to remove rocks. And I think a lot of times Christians fail to see that not everybody is searching when we first teach the gospel. Not everybody has a love for the truth. They have all they got are rocks. And in order for us to plant the seed, we're going to have to remove those rocks. And I'm speaking metaphorically. And so we may have to try to develop a good example before them so that they would, have a desire for the truth, a love for the truth. And we do that, like Jesus said, by letting our light shine before men, letting them see Christ in our lives and how it works. But sometimes we have to help people, remove those rocks that are before them, like the beliefs that they have. And I think that goes along with what Chris said. There was a time when I was preaching a meeting down in Tulsa, and I was eating breakfast with the elder, and the waitress came up. And I invited her, he invited her to the gospel meeting, and she's like, "Oh," she said, I'm a teacher at such and such a, church." And I said, "Well, maybe we could study sometime. Would you like to have a Bible study?" And she was like, "Oh, yes. Oh, yes." But, the elder was quick to say, "Well, we'll be the one doing the teaching." And, after she left, I said, "Why can't she teach?" And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not let her tell us what she believes? Let her make her points." And I said, and then we can just say, "Okay, how do you reconcile that with this?" And let her answer the question. Put that in front of her. And Chris, Josh, that's how I think sometimes we remove the rocks from the garden, so to speak. We have to not quarrel with them, but we have to put things in front of them to let them to be able to, identify, I got a problem here with my convictions. How do I reconcile this? And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. There's a couple of expressions that I think are have always been true. One, to Chris Kramer's point, would be you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, in contrast to that, there's another saying, well, you can add a little salt to his oats to make him thirsty. And that's basically what we're doing, right? We're being that salt, that influence that is causing them to think, reconsider, or challenge them to, with their own beliefs and how they got to that point. And that's something that we need to be willing to do. One of the things that I love doing is gaining knowledge, gaining information, just learning new things. Well, there are interrogation tactics. If you ever watch these YouTube videos where these police officers are interrogating various suspects, one of the things they want to do is, to get the truth out, let them talk, get them to talking. That's one of the first things. And sometimes with various questions, you can lead a conversation, but people think that they have to be doing the talking if they're going to be in control. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That isn't the case hardly at all. Sometimes you can be very much in control of the situation and very subtly guiding the conversation or the study while they're doing the majority of the talking, right? You can still control the situation, and it takes practice. It's something you've got to be out there doing, but nevertheless, it's going to be hard to change a mind or convince someone that their mind needs to be changed if you don't even know, as we mentioned earlier, where they're at, what they believe, and letting them talk is one of the first ways to do that, is to find that out, and then challenge it, in all kindness and love and gentleness, but with boldness, challenge it and welcome the opportunity to be challenged. 1 Peter 3 verse 15, we need to be ready to give an account and an answer for the hope that is in us to all those who ask. And so, we need to be ready to answer questions. And we need to also keep that in mind. Not only are we asking questions, but we need to be ready to answer questions, which means we need to welcome people to ask us questions as well.
Can I make a point here real quick? Everybody has to deal with the thought of death. And you got to live with, the idea that all men die. And everybody has to, they have to find a way to live with that. And so convictions arise in every person's heart that enable them to help to live with the inevitable fact that they're going to die. What's next? And so, going into any study or any thought about eternity with anybody, you're going to have to take that into consideration that, they have more than likely already have formed some type of conviction to help them deal with the fact that they're going to die. What's next? I mean, that's what you're going to have to, and that can be a big obstacle. That could be a big rock.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Josh.
I think, to what you were saying earlier about, being ready to answer questions, I think there's the thing that we need to remember that truth fears no investigation. We should have confidence in the truth and the truth's ability to prevail. We may not have a confidence in our ability to speak the truth and to share the truth, but the truth itself is what is important, and that's what will prevail ultimately. We had one of our elders did a invitation last night, and he was talking about supposed contradictions in the Bible, and pointed out one particular contradiction or supposed contradiction, and was giving some plausible answers to that. And I think there's some very likely, very good solutions to that supposed contradiction. But anyway, the point that he was making at the end was, be willing to ask questions if you've got them. Be willing to explore and find the answer, because there are answers out there. So that's going to require an open mind in all of us in order to be able to do that. But I think there has to be a recognition as well of the fact that there are answers out there. We may not like the answers, but they are answers out there. I think one of the things that the skeptic, one of the failures of the skeptics is they act as if there's no answer whatsoever. They want to say that there is no answer, and the reality is they just don't like the answer. But there is an answer, and so we need to be willing to accept whatever truth is out there, but at the same time, be willing to investigate to determine what the truth is. And I think some of that requires having an open mind of ourselves, that we're not approaching this study from a standpoint of, I'm going to teach you and I'm going to show you the truth and I'm just going to whip you into the truth, but rather let's together open the Bible and study it to find out what the truth is. I think that approach, it makes a big difference in trying to change the minds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Richard.
Let's see here. We got some comments. Oh boy, I'm way behind here. Chris Kramer, it's hard to change your mind that doesn't think it needs to change. Jesus said that he came to heal the sick. The Pharisees did not believe they were sick. I think I put that one up there.
Yeah.
Thomas, we've been studying discipleship. We have contrasted apologetics and evangelism. One post made the following. uh, like the sower, we can cultivate the ground. And then Thomas said, evangelism is planting the seed, while apologetics is preparing the soil to receive the seed. What do you think about that?
I think both of you have talked about that very thing. I mean, you talked about with our father-in-law, right? Preparing the soil, getting the rocks out, removing all of that, getting all of that done. But how does that take place, right? I mean, we can say that we got to remove these barriers, but again, I think in part, a majority of the time, it goes back to, the less is more aspect as far as your talking, your being the one to do all the talking. It can be more harmful than good, because you can put someone in a box that they don't want to be in, or don't believe that they would fit, or that you don't know where they're at. As we mentioned earlier, you don't know what they believe, what they agree or disagree with, maybe where they're going. As Josh pointed out, and I've run into a lot of people that are members of Baptist churches that do not believe in once saved, always saved, even though it's a core belief of the Baptist religion. Not everyone who's a part of that believes that. And you think, well, wait a minute, shouldn't they though? You think about even sometimes members of the Lord's church, you go to local congregations, you're going to find some people that don't agree with everything that is being taught for one reason or another, right? And so continual teaching has to happen, but the only way to know that is to listen. Let them talk. Sometimes people talk their way out of things. Sometimes, you can subtly introduce a new thought to them from the scriptures, and all of a sudden you go back another week or two later, and it's their idea, right? It's like, oh, this is what the scriptures teach. This is what I believe. And so sometimes just saying, well, since you believe this, rather than what do you believe, is really the best way to get to the point of removing some of those barriers and preparing the soil. Let them talk, and listen, so that you'll know what preparation needs to be made.
And there are times, there's a passage, and I want to make this point because it came to me. I was having a Bible study not too long ago, and Proverbs 27, as iron sharpens iron, and I think it's talking about how a brother can, encourage his other brother. But a lot of people use that, and I think rightfully so, with Bible study. They talk about it at church, about brethren coming together to study the Bible. And that's like iron sharpening iron. But one thing we forget about that is when you're sharpening the blade of your lawnmower, for instance, that's metal on metal. There's friction. And there's going to be times when the person you're trying to influence is going to get upset because you probably, with the truth, are rocking their world. And they may get up in your face and they may yell names at you. Who knows how they're going to react. I've been kicked out of one guy's house twice in studying the Bible. And both times he asked me to come back. But yes, I mean, there's times when there's going to be friction, and you got to know how to prepare for that. Are you going to respond by quarreling? Because the Bible speaks against that. He says we're not supposed to react that way. Where's that in Timothy? Let me look it up here.
2 Timothy
2:24. Servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient and humility, correcting those who are in opposition. So we understand, that's we can't lash out at others when they yell at us, but they're going to yell at us. All right. When you rock their world with the truth, they are going to react. And I got to remind everybody, the Apostle Paul was holding the coats of those people who killed Stephen in Acts 7. He was holding their coats. So he played a big role in that. And then what do we know? He got converted. So, there's a process there where you're going to have to expect friction. And it's going to come. And how you react to that friction is part of teaching the gospel. You can't react like this is personal. You can't react like they're attacking you. You can't take it personal. You got to remember, what Jesus said to Paul. He said, "Why are you?" He was Saul at the time. "Why are you persecuting me?" Now, I'm sure a lot of those Christians were thinking, "Hey, I'm getting persecuted here." That's not the way Jesus saw it. Jesus saw it as, you guys are not, you guys are killing Stephen. You're persecuting me. And that's the way he looks at it. And I think that's the way we all need to look at it. When friction takes place, if it was just me, I'd just let them alone. I'd say, well, if that's what you want to believe, go on. But it's because of my devotion to Jesus Christ and what I know about the truth, I'm willing to sit there and let them abuse me, because I want them to be saved. But we're going to have to we can't take it personal. We have to expect it and move on.
Yeah. I think, Josh brought up, there are sometimes people just aren't going to want to change, and their minds, they're going to refuse to change. And there are those out there in various situations. I've studied with a young lady, and on another point, she came into the house and was asking my wife and I a personal question about something that she was thinking about doing. And, my wife told her, "No, really, I think you need to reconsider. I think maybe you ought to handle this situation this way." And then she asked me what I thought. And I was, this is what I think. We had, talk a little more. And then she asked my wife the same question again. This is really what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And my wife answered the same again. After another 5 minutes or so, she asked the same question again. As my wife began to answer, I just stopped her. I said, "What? No, Michelle, don't. She's not looking for you to answer her question. She's looking for you to justify what she's already determined she's going to do." Right. And she just it's like he knows me so well. and sometimes that's what the mindset that people have. They want others to justify their actions. And they want us to give some credence to what it is they're doing or what they already believe. And that's where our challenge comes in. That's where, our standing firm on the truth with all kindness, love, and boldness, we don't move from the truth. Whether they change or not is going to be up to them, right? We can't force that. But we can't, through frustration, give in, right? And just say, just whatever, yeah, you're fine. It may not be the best in judgment, but go ahead and do that. Listen, if it's wrong, it's wrong. And we've got to stand firm on the truth and let them, say, "No, I'm not going to listen to you, in spite of the judgments maybe, or the truth that you're presenting. I'm going to do what I want to do." And their true colors will come out, but it's got to be on them, right? And all that we can do is stand firm on the truth.
There are Christians that hate confrontation. I mean, they run away from it. They despise it. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is no way you can do the Lord's work on this earth without accepting the fact there will be confrontation. It's going to happen. People are going to get mad at you. They're going to call you names. There's going to be persecution involved with this. Jesus said that. And until Christians accept that fact, that there's going to be persecution, even at church, among brethren, there's going to be persecution. Until we accept that fact, then a lot of the work's not going to get done, because I know people who hate confrontation so much, they are not addressing other people's needs in being shown that they're wrong about a conviction that they have. And that's unfortunate.
Go ahead, Josh.
I would say as well, one of the important characteristics to have in this is patience, not expecting people to change overnight. There's a book, I don't really want to say the name right now, but in this book, the author details his conversion and the process that he went through to be converted. And what he shows is that the guy who was instrumental in converting him taught and taught and taught and taught, and he shows and he walks through his own mindset of accepting the truth, and how at first he was like, no, and but then as he started thinking more about it, eventually it kind of clicked, and eventually he realized, you know what, this is right, and this is what I need to do. That's where we kind of talked about earlier, the wisdom between knowing who we should have patience with and who we can need to shake the dust off our feet and move on. There might be a fine line there, but we don't want to give up on people too quickly either, and just assume that if they don't immediately accept the truth, that they're just the hardened heart that's not going to receive it. Sometimes patience is required, and we do need to spend some time and to put in the work in order to see the soil produce. I think that's part of why that cultivation is so important. The farmer does a lot of work in order to get that fruit that he harvests, whatever it may be. There's a lot of work and patience that's put in order to bear fruit there. And so it's going to be no different when it comes to the word of God as well. So practicing patience.
Wasn't that the sentence placed, on Adam about when he tilled the ground, there'd be thorns? That, there was going to be a lot of work involved in it. Mm-hmm. It's just not cultivating the soil and planting the seed and everything just comes up so easy. There's going to be a lot of work in it. And I think that's probably why Jesus used that, as his comparison to what our jobs are, because, it's going to take a lot of work. It's just not having a cup of soil that you buy at the store and putting a seed in it and putting it on your kitchen, counter and watching it grow. It doesn't work that way in the real world. It's you got to care enough about people that you're willing to put in the work. Mm-hmm. And boy, I'm telling you what, it can be a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, communication is one of the struggles of relationships, right? And communication is something that we have to work on ourselves. We have to be willing to adjust, make changes, and change our minds sometimes on the approach that we take. Sometimes look at things, differently. And sometimes before we can change the minds of others, we have to be willing to change our own mind. And I'll give you an example of this. Romans chapter 1, verse 14 through 16. When Paul made the point to the Romans, as he's writing here in Romans chapter 1, he says, I am indebted to the Greek and the barbarian, to the wise and the foolish, and to you who are in Rome also. And then he goes on to say that I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. But why is he indebted to them, right? Usually we have this mindset that, what have they done for us? All right, because I'm going to return a favor. I'm going to do this because they did this for me. And what Paul is saying here is, I'm indebted to them. And it's not that they've done anything for me. 1 John chapter 4 in verses 10 and 11, you read there that not that we loved God, but that he loved us and gave his only begotten son to be that propitiation. But he goes on to say that because God loved us, we ought to love one another. And that word ought is the same word in Romans 1 verse 14, where Paul says indebted or owe it to them. And you see why it is we owe it to our brethren. It's not because our brethren have done anything for us. It's because God and what he has done for us. And so sometimes changing our mind on even the reason or the purpose that we're engaging in this study needs to take place first, right? We owe it to them, not because they've done anything for us, but because of what God has done for us. We owe it to them, those around us, to do our best to try and bring about a change in their life for the salvation of their souls.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, I don't know, I can speak. Well, I can speak, for me and Josh especially. Chris, you were taught by your wife, but the Lord put the silver spoon in my mouth. I was raised by Christian parents, and I have had biblical teaching all my life, and I was led to the truth by the Lord all my life. And that's to be said for very few people, very, very few people. And I think, what the Lord said, to whom much is given, much is expected. I think there is an indebtedness to others, knowing that the Lord has placed you in a position where you can help a lot of people because where the Lord placed you in this world. And so you owe it to them because God loves them, yes, but because the Lord expects more of you. You got to get out there and do this. And I do think that there is an indebtedness to the Lord for all the things he has done for us, not just what he did for us on the cross, but of all the spiritual blessings that we have in Christ, and understanding that not everyone has been blessed as richly as others. And those of us who have been blessed more, we have to understand that more is expected. We need to take what the Lord has taught us and then go out and share that with other people. Those people who had not had that silver spiritual spoon in their mouth, we should feel indebted to go and take that gospel to them.
Absolutely. Josh, you got any last thoughts?
Well, I guess our we need to make it our focus to change the hearts of people, because that's where Christ is reigning.
Yeah.
It's not that Jesus is going to come back to Jerusalem and reign. He's going to reign in the hearts and lives of people. And our goal is to help open up the hearts of people to receive him as king and to honor him. And so having the wisdom, patience, love, all of those things to accomplish that is going to be necessary.
Richard, last thoughts?
Yeah. 2 Timothy 2:23 and 24, have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels. Be able to distinguish between that and the truth. Don't get involved in, like, politics. That's going to lead to arguments. I mean, there's no reason at all in trying to teach the gospel to get into politics. Stick with what is going to be confrontational, and that is the gospel. And then everything else, like politics, will have far-reaching effects, but stick with the gospel and don't waste your time with some of these other things.
Yeah. And I would add this, I mentioned earlier, sometimes it means we have to change our own mind in our approach. And people are asking themselves sometimes the question, who am I? Who am I to go and to teach the gospel? Who am I to go out and share that word with people around me? Who was Moses to be sent back to Egypt? Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house, but yet he was taught in all the ways of the Hebrews. He knew both sides. So he was perfectly equipped to go and to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Who was Jesus to be our mediator, right? Even now, pleading our case before God. Well, he is God and he is man. He knows both sides of the case. So he can plead our case because he's been man, and he before God the Father because he's God. Well, who are we? We were sinners. We were separated from God because of our sin, and we've been cleansed of our sin by the blood of Christ. We know what it's like to be apart from him and in need of salvation, and we know what it's like to have hope of eternal life and the glories of heaven. We are equipped. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that's what we need to do, is change our mind in our approach if we're going to expect to change the minds of those around us. Folks, we appreciate everybody who tunes in and listens to Berean Spirits. We try to be here every week on Thursday mornings. Plus, you can listen to the podcast as well on your favorite podcast app. Just search for Berean Spirits, and you should be able to find us there also and listen at your own convenience. You can always email us, bereanspirits@gmail.com also. But until next time, remember to search the scriptures with Berean Spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean Spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.